My name is Spencer Aldridge, and I used to be a medical student. Cardiology, if you can believe that. All that time memorizing the conduction system of the heart, and I still managed to flunk out of the ethical part. It's funny. People always assume obsession means bloodshot eyes and note cards taped to the ceiling. But for me, it started quietly, in a back room at the University Museum, holding a preserved fetus with two faces. They called it a Janus baby. Two skulls, one spine, perfectly symmetrical. I stared at it for a long time. Longer than you're supposed to, probably. Most people walk past things like that with a little shiver and a lot of pretending they aren't curious. I wasn't pretending. I was curious. I wanted to know why it happened. I wanted to know what it meant. Anyway, this is my story. And as my assistant, you're kind of obligated to listen. That's how this works. I talk, you take notes, and try not to look too horrified. I doubt you're not curious. After all, you applied to work for me straight out of college instead of getting a nice clean job at a hospital like a responsible adult. And that tells me everything I need to know. Now, where was I? Right. I started requesting more time in the anatomy labs. Stayed late in the morgue. I wasn't sneaking around, not yet. It was just curiosity at first. Clinical, even. But then I found the tooth tumor. The medical term is hard to pronounce, so I'll spare you my butchered pronunciations. But if you'd seen it, really seen it, you'd understand. It was smiling without a mouth. I held it in my hand and thought, this shouldn't exist. And yet it did. So how many other things were out there that shouldn't exist but did? That's when I stopped caring about normal bodies. I didn't want to study how things worked. I wanted to study how they went wrong. Not accidents, not random mutations, but the places where the body rebelled against the blueprint. Things that broke the rules in elegant, impossible ways. I started collecting case studies. Files, photos, preserved samples when I could get them. Tumors, fused twins, bone growths shaped with antlers. I filed them under type anomalies. That's what I called them then. I had this idea, half-formed even to me, that maybe these weren't just defects. Maybe they were echoes, genetic throwbacks, things we weren't supposed to be anymore. I wrote papers, I gave a talk. Not to the whole department, just a few postgrads, a couple professors I trusted. They laughed. Not all of them. Some just looked uncomfortable. They used words like dangerous and irresponsible. But I could see it in their eyes. They didn't not believe me. They just didn't want to admit it. After all, we all know the stories, don't we? The old ones, Greek myth, folk tales, the strange bedtime warnings our grandparents muttered when they thought we weren't listening. Half-formed creatures, beasts with the faces of men, men with the teeth of beasts, werewolves, mermaids, things that blur the line, things that don't belong in any anatomy textbook, but somehow show up in every culture. Why do you think that is? People say they're just stories, but they were stories before we had microscopes, before we had genetics, back when the only explanation for a child born with scales or hooves was that something got to them in the womb. A god, a curse, a monster. We've cleaned it up with terminology and white coats, but the fear is still there, buried under our lab reports and insurance codes. That's when the real work started. I stopped using names in my files, started coding the subjects. I knew I was crossing a line, but once you've seen what I've seen, you can't go back to pretending. I started meeting with patients off campus, people with rare deformities, the kind of cases that don't make it into textbooks because no one wants to admit they exist. I'd take samples, blood, hair, tissue, just small things, nothing invasive. Then came subject 9, a boy, 11 years old, webbed fingers, underdeveloped jaw, thickened skull with dermal plating that looked almost scaled. The scan showed something else too, extra vertebrae, coiled tight at the base of the spine, like a tail that never finished growing. I ran tests. I repeated them. I lied to his parents, said it was part of a scholarship study. They believed me. That paper never got published. The faculty burned it. Literally burned it. Said I was risking lawsuits, criminal charges, academic disaster. The dean called it medical malpractice. I called it research. They told me to pack my things and not come back. I didn't argue. I just left. Quietly. Before anyone else could come knocking. That was 3 years ago. Then came an opportunity I didn't see coming. Working at this zoo. Most people think zoos are for animals. And most of the time they're right. Lions, penguins, giraffes. Things you can point to in a book. Things with Latin names and well-documented diets. Things that poop on schedule and die in predictable ways. Bracken Hollow is not that kind of zoo. Technically, it's called the Bracken Hollow Zoological Institute. That's what it says on the sign nailed to the front gate, right underneath a row of buzzed-out security cameras. If you try to look it up, you'll hit a dead end. No phone number, no photos. The land's listed under a conservation trust that doesn't technically exist. It's buried up in northern Pennsylvania, in a valley you won't find unless you already know where to look. The road is long and cracked, and nobody comes out here unless they're supposed to. The main building used to be a hospital. You can still see the bones of it. Tile floors, old whitewashed walls, steel doors with peeling paint. There are rooms that still smell like disinfectant, especially when it rains. I've converted most of the old surgical wings into specimen rooms. One wing for soft tissue samples, another for bone fragments, another for living things. The cages line the floor of what used to be a quarry behind the building. We've reinforced them with a mix of steel, concrete, and, well, whatever works. Some of the things here don't follow normal rules, so the cages can't either. I wasn't hired to be a zookeeper. Officially, I'm listed as a caretaker and field specialist. That's a fancy way of saying I feed things, I clean things, and I try to keep them from dying, or escaping, or killing each other. There was a manual when I got here, but it was handwritten and water damaged, and ended abruptly on page 17 with the words, "If it speaks, do not reply." I kept it in a drawer, mostly for morale. The zoo didn't start with me. Somebody else ran it before. Some kind of old naturalist, I think. There's no full record, just bits and pieces, scribbled notes, inked diagrams, a few jars with faded labels. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he retired. Maybe he got eaten. Either way, I'm here now. And the creatures still need tending. And I'm not alone. My only companion is a dog I've named Bailey. She's a mutt, mostly shepherd with a little bit of whatever else makes a dog sturdy and opinionated. She showed up a few days after I did. Skinny, wet, and acting like the place already belonged to her. I didn't argue. She's been with me ever since. Sleeps at the foot of my cot. Follows me on rounds. sits outside the enclosures and stares like she's trying to figure out what everything used to be. Bailey doesn't talk, obviously, but she communicates in her own way. When I skip meals, she gets loud about it. When I forget to sleep, she curls up on my notes and won't move until I do. She sighs when I smoke too much and growls at the back door every time I leave it unlocked. She has saved my life more than once, though not in any dramatic, heroic way. Mostly by making sure I don't do anything too stupid without someone noticing. I talk to her more than I should. Not just commands, real conversation. She listens like she understands about half, which is probably more than I can say for most people. I like having her around. The work gets heavy sometimes, you know how it is. The specimens don't make good company. Some of them are barely sentient. Some are too sentient. Either way, Bailey keeps me from forgetting how to act like a person. So that's where we are. A long way from anywhere, surrounded by creatures that shouldn't exist, in a building that probably shouldn't be standing. I've made it work for now. And you, my assistant, my brilliant, precious assistant, you're going to help me with my work. Congratulations, by the way. Not many people get this far. Means you passed the screening process. Or you botched the screening process somehow and got in by accident. Either way, you're here now. And that means you're mine. There's a lot to learn. Files to review, feeding schedules, specimen histories, containment protocols that may or may not be based on trial and error. You'll get the hang of it, probably. But before we get to all that, I need to catch you up. You can't take care of something if you don't understand what it is, and nothing here makes sense until you hear the stories. So I'm going to tell them to you. All of them. I suggest you make some coffee. Get comfortable. You're going to be here for a while. Story 1. Specimen number 14. The Harpy. My first day here didn't feel like a first day. There was no welcome speech, no paperwork, no orientation video with cheerful music explaining where the emergency exits were. I got out of my car, and someone in a green jacket handed me a clipboard and walked away. That was it. I was the new caretaker of the impossible. I didn't have a room yet, just a cot shoved into a storage wing with an extension cord running to a flickering lamp. I didn't care. I was too busy trying to understand where I was and what this place actually was. The cages down in the quarry were spaced like animal pens, but too deep and too narrow to be standard. The bars had hand-welded cross stations, and some were reinforced with what looked like scrap metal, fishing hooks, and strangely pieces of religious symbols. Not one cage was labeled. There was no index, no master list. I thought maybe I'd start slow. Find the food stores, map the place out, settle in. Then the truck came. It was backed up to the main loading dock. No logos, no lights. Just the deep hum of something that had been driving a long time. 2 men climbed out. They weren't talkers. They opened the truck bed, lifted something out, and carried it through the rear doors like it was furniture. I followed. I didn't have clearance, but nobody stopped me. Maybe they assumed I already knew what I was doing. I didn't. The something they unloaded was tangled in a net. A real net. Nylon cord with a drawstring, the kind you'd see slung from a helicopter in a nature documentary. It was wet and heavy, and dripping a red-brown mix of blood and dirt across the tiles. Feathers came off in clumps. Black ones. Long and sharp. They looked like they should have belonged to a hawk or a crow, but bigger. Too big. At first I thought it was a bird, but then I saw the fingers. Not talons, fingers. Long and dark, with nails that were yellowed and curled like claws. The net had caught around her shoulders, twisting her limbs in on themselves, and I could see the structure of the wings as they bent and folded. Bone, tendon, and feather. Bird-like, yes, but not entirely. The bones were jointed like arms. Too human. Her eyes were open. Black, glossy, and very still. She didn't blink. She didn't move. She only watched. No one said what she was. Nobody explained. They dragged the net into a cage in the lower west wing, cut the cords loose, and just left. The cage door locked behind them, with a noise that felt too final for something still alive. I stood outside the bars and stared. The clipboard I'd been given had a single line of text at the top. Specimen number 14. Underneath it, someone had written, "Do not sedate. Feed raw protein. Monitor vitals. Temporary placement." That was all. I found a set of gloves, a set of tongs, and a tub of liver in the cooler room. It wasn't marked, but the smell told me what it was. I brought it down, piece by piece, and fed her through the bars. She watched, and ate, and blinked once. I set up a notepad on a tray stand and took basic vitals from a distance. I couldn't get close enough for detailed measurements, but I recorded her respiration. It was shallow but consistent. No vocalizations, no signs of aggression. I wrote everything down. Her anatomy was wrong. Not in a broken way, in a designed way. Bird structures aren't meant to carry human weight. Hollow bones are too fragile. But she had them. When she shifted her weight, I heard a low metallic creak, like wind chimes behind a wall. And that's when I realized the bones were not normal. I collected one of the feathers that had fallen and sent it for testing later. The results came back with trace elements I have never seen in biological samples. Titanium, nickel, something unlisted. It made no sense. Nature doesn't lace skeletons with metal. That's not evolution, that's design. I stayed there for hours, just watching. Couldn't help it. She hardly moved, just slow, steady breathing. And even that was fascinating. The way her shoulders lifted with each breath showed where the wing bones connected. Not like a bird's, not exactly. These were shaped more like arms. You could see where the feathers thinned out and skin took over again. Wings and arms. One system, two functions. Later, back on the cot, I couldn't sleep. I filled page after page of notes, diagrams, questions, comparisons. I wrote down every detail I could remember. The way she turned her head, the way her feet curled around the bars, the exact shade of her feathers. I thought if I could get it all on paper, I might start to make sense of her. But all I did was prove what I already suspected. She was a harpy. I mean that literally. One of those harpies. The kind from old stories, Greek ones mostly, where they lured men off ships, snatched food straight from the table, tore apart the wicked, and flew away screaming. You've heard about them, right? Wings like vultures, faces like women, claws that could rip a tree in half. Nobody ever agreed if they were demons or spirits or something in between, but they showed up everywhere, across different cultures, different times. Always the same idea. Part human, part bird, all danger. She fit. Every detail matched. Unfortunately, I didn't have that much time with her. The next morning, she was gone. The Institute sent instructions by envelope, the kind sealed in wax with no return address. The letter was typed and impersonal. It said to log the death, cremate the body, and report the loss under natural degeneration of incomplete specimen. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I didn't follow it. I waited until nightfall. Then I carried her out myself, wrapped in canvas, tucked in a transport case. I took her to the edge of the quarry, near the back of the old aviary building. The soil was loose, and the ground had eroded from past weather. I dug a space behind the wall where the birds used to nest. Wasn't deep, but it was far enough from the cameras and just close enough to keep an eye on. I buried her there and labeled the location in my own files as Specimen number 14. Missing. I never told anyone. Sometimes, when I'm walking that wing at night, I hear the creak of weight in the rafters above me, like something shifting, like metal bones settling into rest. The cages are always empty, but I still leave out food once a week, just in case. Story number 2. Specimen 67. You've made it this far, so I think you're ready for more. You understand now that this isn't a normal zoo. We don't keep normal animals. We don't follow normal rules. And the things here don't survive on grain pellets or vitamin supplements. Some of them need meat. Fresh meat. And some of them, like the one I'm about to tell you about, need more than that. This story takes place in my second week on the job. One morning, I found a file sitting on my desk. It didn't come with instructions or a note, just a thick folder labeled Specimen 67. Inside were blood test results, scan images, handwritten notes, and one very short list of directions. The directions said, Room 9. Sedate twice daily. Keep restraints secured. Do not enter alone. Must be fed. Never speak first. Room 9 is located in the far east wing of the main building. That part of the facility used to be part of the hospital's intensive care unit. Now it's sealed off between two locked doors. The walls are reinforced. There are no windows. When I opened the viewing window for the first time, I saw a large man strapped into a steel chair. His arms were bound tightly at his wrists and elbows. A thick leather strap ran across his chest, holding him back against the frame. He wasn't moving. His head was bent forward, so I couldn't see his face at first. Then I noticed the head wasn't human. It was the skull of a bull. Not a mask. Not a helmet. A real skull, with curved horns and worn bone. It was connected directly to his spine. There were no seams, no surgical staples. It looked like the bones had fused naturally, as if the body had grown that way on its own. That wasn't the only unusual thing. There were 2 heartbeats, one in the chest, one in the skull. Both slow but steady. You could hear them if you stood close. There was a heart monitor connected by a wire, and it gave off a single beep every 30 seconds. Not because he was dying. That was just his normal rhythm. I looked through the medical records. His body was human but heavily altered. He had large muscle growth, especially in the back and shoulders. His skin was thick, almost like leather, and there were dozens of scars. Some looked surgical, some didn't. The brain scans showed two kinds of electrical activity. One matched normal human patterns, thinking, language, decision-making. The other was something closer to animal behavior. Fight response, aggression, hunger. Both were happening at the same time. This wasn't a mutation. It was an experiment. His file said he was created by a man named Dr. Callow. I'd heard the name once before, during a conference in my second year of med school. He'd disappeared after being investigated for ethics violations. According to his notes, Callow believed that human instincts had become too weak. He thought emotions made us inefficient. So he tried to bring instinct back. He used animal glands and hormone treatments to change the human body from the inside out. He didn't just want strength. He wanted a creature that followed its urges without hesitation. No guilt, no fear, only drive. Specimen 67 was the result of that research. And now they live here with us at Bracken Hollow Zoo. The file said he had to be fed regularly. Didn't say with what, so I asked one of the senior handlers. They told me, "You don't need to worry about that. The benefactors handle it." I found out what that meant a few days later. A truck pulled up after dark. They kept the lights off, and I noticed there was no plate number. The driver stayed in the cab. Two men unloaded a crate from the back and wheeled it inside. When they opened it, I saw a man inside. He was unconscious, maybe drugged. His hands were cuffed. There was a tag around his wrist. They took him straight to room 9. I wasn't asked to help. I checked the tag after they left. Had no name, just a case number. Later, I learned that the people in these crates are criminals, not people with speeding tickets. They are violent offenders, people with sealed records or who've disappeared from prison transfers. Officially, they're gone. Nobody's looking for them. This zoo has a deal with the government. It's not written down anywhere, but it's real. In exchange for continued funding and silence, the benefactors provide a steady supply of disposable people. The kind of people the system's already given up on. And the zoo uses them to feed the creatures that can't survive on anything else. That includes Specimen 67. They don't call him a man. They call him the Minotaur. He doesn't fight the restraints, doesn't yell. But when it's feeding time, you can hear what happens through the walls. The room is soundproofed, but not perfectly. You hear enough. One night, sedation failed. I was doing rounds when I noticed his vitals weren't showing up on the monitor. I went to check the wiring, and I saw the cable had been pulled out. I looked through the window, and he was sitting upright, still restrained, but awake. His head turned toward me. I didn't know what to do, so I spoke. I asked, "Can you hear me?" He looked at me for a long time. Then in a slow and clear voice, he said, "Where's the boy who fed me?" That was all he said. He didn't speak again, and I didn't know what he meant. There was no record of a boy in his file, no initials, no notes. Maybe it was a caretaker before me. Maybe it was someone from the lab where he was made. Maybe it was someone he remembered before all this. I don't have the answer, and I haven't asked again. Now, every time the truck shows up at night, I stay in my room. And a word of advice, since we're getting comfortable with each other. Don't go to room 9. even if you're curious. Especially if you're curious. My last assistant let curiosity get the better of him. He wanted to observe up close. I admire the initiative, but he didn't escape with all his limbs intact. He still sends postcards, believe it or not. Lovely penmanship, poor depth perception. I'd rather keep you in one piece. It's hard to run tests with only one arm. Harder still to write neatly. So be clever, be careful, and stay out of that wing. I have 2 more stories for you. They're short but important. You'll be working with both of these specimens closely, so you'll need to understand what they are, where they came from, and what they're capable of. Let's begin. Story 3. The Taxidermist's Daughter. Specimen 5 arrived in a wooden crate padded with velvet lining. She was packaged upright, with her arms folded neatly over her chest. Her body had been preserved carefully. A folded note had been placed between her hands. It said, "For continued observation, she may wake soon." She had the form of a human woman, but her body had been built from multiple animals. Her legs ended in the split hooves of a deer. Her arms were thin and long, with joints that bent too far. Small feathers covered parts of her back and shoulders, and thin wings, closer to a crow's than anything else, were attached along the shoulder blades. Her eyes reflected light and were vertical slit like a cat's. There were stitches along nearly every major joint. Her condition was stable. No decay, no rot, no signs of active circulation or brain activity, but also no decomposition. I placed her in a sealed observation room with controlled humidity and temperature. There were no restraints. I logged her in as Specimen 5 and ran basic scans over the following days. No movement, no sound. She opened her eyes on day 18 during a routine observation. She sat upright, turned her head toward me, and said, "Where's my father?" That was the first thing she said. I searched the crate again for any origin details. The address label was mostly scraped off, but one stamped line still showed part of a name. The Vail Institute for Anatomical Restoration. I cross-checked the name with our archive and found mention of a private medical facility in Vermont. It operated between 1889 and 1946 and was listed as destroyed by fire. Records of the institute mentioned one name several times: Dr. Thomas Greaves. He was an anatomist and a self-taught taxidermist. According to archived documents, his last experiment involved assembling a full human form using preserved parts from multiple animals. He died in 1903. There is no confirmed birth certificate or living record for Specimen 5. Her tissue structure shows signs of preservation chemicals from the early 20th century, similar to arsenic-based embalming fluid. I estimate she has not aged in over 100 years. She continues to ask about her father. She's not asked about anything else with the same consistency. She does not eat. She rarely speaks. When she does, it is limited to questions about the weather, the passage of time, or unfamiliar sounds. She has no concept of digital devices or electric lighting, but does not seem afraid of them. She prefers to sit near the observation window when it rains. Bailey, my dog, likes her. This is unusual. Bailey growls at most specimens and ignores the rest. With Specimen 5, she's calm. She often lies near the door of the room while the subject is awake. I have no explanation for this behavior. but I take it as a sign of low threat level. I asked Bailey once, "Do you know something I don't?" She scratched behind her ear and rolled over, which I took as either a no or a refusal to answer. This specimen confirms there are other facilities like ours, or at least there were. The Vale Institute was destroyed, but someone kept its work alive long enough to ship her here. That means we are not the only people collecting and studying these creatures. Someone else out there knows what we know. Story 4. The Candleman. Specimen 34 was recovered from the basement of an abandoned research station outside Russia. When the recovery team arrived, the walls, ceilings, and floors were covered in a thick layer of wax. The wax was still warm. It had sealed doors shut and clogged ventilation ducts. There were signs of fire damage in every room. Burned equipment, melted wires, and several charred human bodies were found inside. In the central room, the team located a humanoid figure partially melted into the floor. They cut it free and transported it to Bracken Hollow in a sealed, heat-resistant container. The figure was warm to the touch. After arrival, the wax began to shift. Over the next 32 hours, the specimen reformed itself into a human-like body. The face had no clear features, just shallow indentations where eyes and a mouth should be. The rest of the body followed normal human proportions, but lacked skin texture. The entire surface was smooth and soft, like cooling wax. A single wick was embedded in the top of the skull. The wick remains unlit. We store him in a containment pod made of reinforced glass with temperature control. He emits constant heat from his body, enough to blister unprotected skin. When fully formed, he becomes aware of nearby movement. If a person enters the enclosure, he approaches slowly. If the subject gets too close, he reacts violently. One technician opened the chamber without authorization to take a direct sample. The specimen made contact. The technician was immediately covered in wax. It spread over his body in less than 30 seconds. When we pulled him out, he was fully encased, mouth sealed, limbs frozen, no visible breathing. We placed him in cryo storage. He remains alive but unresponsive. The behavior resembles how spiders trap prey in silk before feeding. The wax doesn't kill immediately. It immobilizes, preserves, and may serve a digestive function over time. We believe the specimen is capable of feeding through absorption. I told Bailey, he's like House of Wax, but worse. She stared at me, walked over, and knocked my coffee off the table. Fine, no jokes, I said. We're running tests to understand the regenerative proportions of the wax. Every time the body melts, it reforms exactly the same way. The wick remains centered. The limbs always form in the same order. The internal structure is not yet understood. X-rays are inconclusive. We are considering surgical methods, though past contact has resulted in rapid wax spread. He doesn't speak. He does not respond to sound. But he is aware of movement, temperature, and proximity. The pattern of his reconstruction suggests a memory of his own form, possibly a preserved mental image. The specimen came from a Russian sleep research facility that operated without oversight. The original purpose of the project is unclear. But some notes recovered on-site reference, endocrine system manipulation, and long-term deprivation studies. Whatever they were trying to create, it no longer resembles anything human. And that's it. Every story, every file, every half-rotted record I could reconstruct from the archives, my own notes, and whatever the last guy didn't set on fire before he left. I've given you everything I know. At least everything I remember clearly enough to trust. The rest is scribbled on scraps of paper, or floating somewhere in my old field journals. If I find more, you'll be the first to know. But that's the history. And history, as you'll learn, doesn't do much screaming. The present does. You'll be working with these specimens up close, feeding them, observing them, testing them when appropriate, and staying out of reach when necessary. That part's important. These aren't stories anymore, not after today. These are now your responsibilities. They'll be waiting for you down in the quarry cages and behind reinforced doors. Some will speak, some won't. All of them will be watching. Consider what I've told you as a professional courtesy. Most new hires don't get a briefing. They get a key card, a bad flashlight, and instructions not to bleed on the floor. So take this for what it is. A head start. I look forward to seeing how you handle it. Bailey likes you, by the way. That's rare. I don't suggest you let it go to your head, but I'd pay attention to her instincts if I were you. She's never been wrong about a specimen or a person. Your cot is in the north wing, second door on the right. Sheets are clean. I left you a fresh notebook. You'll need it. Your first shift starts in an hour. The schedule's taped to the fridge. Yes, we have a fridge. I'll be in the lab most of the night, finishing up some dissection reports and prepping the sedation rounds. If you need anything, don't shout. Use the intercom or knock respectfully. Good luck, research assistant. I have high expectations.
Hey, huge thank you to all my patrons. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. I hope you enjoyed the story, and have a good night.